Alright guys, today we're going to look at how to simplify radical expressions. So first of all, remember that radical means something that has a radical or a square root symbol. And then expressions means that there's no equal sign. None of these equal anything. This means we're not solving, we're just trying to make everything as simple and as reduced and as small as possible. Okay, so at the end of this, I'm not going to have, x equals 4 or anything like that. I'm just going to take this radical and try to simplify it as best I can. So when you're simplifying radicals, the idea is you want to break down what's inside this radical into two pieces. So some numbers that you can multiply together to get 18. The key is that you want to pick at least one of the numbers that can be square rooted. So if I think about 18, I know that 18 is obviously 1 times 18. Neither of those can be square rooted. And it's also 2 times 9, that's 18. 9 can be square rooted. I can take the square root of that number. So maybe we'll look at this. Let's look at all options though. 18 is also 3 times 6. And I can't take the square root of either of those numbers. So I know for sure these are going to be the two numbers that I'm working with. So what I want to do is I want to break 18 apart as the square root of 2 times 9. Again, 2 times 9 is 18. All I did was break down 18. So now I'm going to take each of these individual values and I'm going to take the square root of 2, then the square root of 9. Okay? We said before that we can take the square root of 9. That's actually going to become 3. So I can't reduce the square root of 2, but I can reduce the square root of 9. That's 3. The only key thing is you want to put that 3 out in front. So this becomes 3 square roots of 2. And this is the most reduced version of the square root of 18 that we can give without giving a decimal. Okay? So we're going to use the same process for example 2. Example 2, if you notice there's a number out in front, but that's okay. We're not going to worry about that right now. The only thing I'm worried about is this 28. Okay? So if you're looking at the number 28, again, you want to break it down into two numbers, and you should be able to take the square root of at least one of them. So obviously we have 1 and 28. I have 2 and 14, 4 and 7, and that's going to be about it. So if I look at my choices, the only one that has something I could take the square root of is this last one, 4 and 7. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this apart and I'm going to say that this becomes 8 times the square root of 4 times 7, because 4 times 7 is 28. Okay, we're just going to get rid of this over here. All right, now that I'm here, I'm going to do the same thing I did in example 1. I'm going to break this down even further. This becomes 8 times the square root of 4 times the square root of 7. So everything is in its own individual radical. Now I know I can take the square root of 4. It becomes 2. So since the square root of 4 is 2, I can rewrite this as 8 times 2, because that's the square root of 4, times the square root of 7. I cannot take the square root of 7. So all that's left to do is multiply 8 and 2. 8 times 2 is 16 times the square root of 7. And this is as simple as we can make this radical. In example 3, I have the square root of 343 times p squared. Now, 343 is a big number, okay? But we don't need to be intimidated by it, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the square root of 343, and we're going to try and break it down as best we can. And I also have a variable inside the radical. I have p squared, so we're going to talk about how to deal with that. Okay, so first off, 343. If you're not sure what to try and divide it by or what multiplies to be 343, it might not come out, right off the top of your head. But 343 can be divided by 7. And if I divide 343 by 7, I get 49. And we can take the square root of this. I can take the square root of 49. So I'm going to go ahead and break that down. So right now I have the square root of 7 times 49 times p squared. Now, just like in every other problem, I'm going to break it down so that every piece is in its own individual radical. I have the square root of 7 times the square root of 49 times the square root of p squared. Well, I can't take the square root of 7, so I'm just going to write that down again. The square root of 49 is 7, and the square root of p squared, remember when you have a radical and an exponent, they cancel each other out, and you keep what's inside, so this just becomes p, because p times p is p squared, so the square root of p squared is p. Alright, so now that I have all of my pieces, I need to reorder them so that I have the whole values out front. So I have 7 times p times the square root of 7. And this is as simple as my radical is going to get. In the last example, I have negative 7 times the square root of 500xy squared. So I have a number out front, I have a really big number in the middle, and I have two variables and one has an exponent. It's okay. We're just going to take it one piece at a time. So first of all, I'm not going to worry about the negative 7 right now. What I'm concerned with is what's in here. So if I look at 500, 500. First of all, the two zeros are kind of a dead giveaway. 500, the easiest way to break it down would be 5 times 100. And you can take the square root of 100 pretty easily. So let's go ahead and break that apart. So right now what I have is negative 7 times the square root. Let's get a better line than that. Times the square root of 5 times 100 times x times y squared. And I'm just going to go ahead and break everything down into its own radical. Negative 7 times the square root of 5 times the square root of 100 times the square root of x times the square root of y squared. So things that I can take the square root of is this 100, is the 100 and the y squared. Remember we talked about the square root of p squared is p, so the square root of y squared is going to be y, right? So I'm just going to take those square roots. Negative 7 times the square root of 5, I can't do anything with that. The square root of 100 is going to be 10. I can't do anything with the square root of x because there's no exponent, so it's going to be stuck underneath that radical, and that's okay. And then the square root of y squared is y. So I'm just going to reorder everything. Anything that's not inside a radical is going to go out front. So negative 7 times 10 times y is out front. And then I have these two radicals. I have the square root of 5 and the square root of x. Well, negative 7 times 10 is negative 70. And then I have a y. The square root of 5 times the square root of x is going to become the square root of 5x. And this is as simple as we can make that radical. Alright guys, this is simplifying radical expressions. Have a great day.